Hello, and welcome back to another session of Worksheet Reviews. Today we're talking about Module 61. Now, Module 61 is now talking about monopolies. Monopolies. We're talking about a monopoly, and we're talking about a firm that essentially there's barriers to enter. There are only one firm that is in the market. In a monopoly, we no longer have, like in a perfectly competitive, we had the market supply and demand curve that led to the individual firms like this here. We are not going to have that. We now take these two and we put it into one graph, and we will have the market demand curve, the market marginal revenue curve. We still have like the marginal cost curve. So now we're kind of taking all the curves from these two and kind of putting them together and making one set of graphs. So now we're in, like I said before, we're in talking about monopolies in module 61. So we're going to go ahead and dig into worksheet 61.1 or worksheet 61.1. And remember, here is a video that you should take a look at prior to doing the worksheet here. So it says here first, it says describe the difference between the demand and marginal revenue curve for perfect competition and for monopolies. Which of the two are price takers and which are price makers? Now, in a perfectly competitive market, once again, we see that in a perfectly competitive market, here's the demand curve and here's the supply curve of the market. And this market price becomes the firm's marginal revenue curve, the demand curve, the average revenue curve, and the price curve. So this is what the firm looks like, right? And this is what the market looks like. But in a monopoly, there is only one firm, so they have the demand curve and they have a marginal revenue curve that looks like this. And then they have the marginal cost curve that looks like this. Over here in the firm, we have the marginal cost curve. We know that they're going to produce where MC equals MR, which is this quantity. Here, we still know that this is the quantity here where MC equals MR, but they're going to charge this price up here because firms are in a monopoly are price makers. So in perfect competition, the price equals the marginal revenue and equals the demand curve. In monopolies, the marginal revenue curve is below or inside the demand curve after the first unit. And the two separate curves as a monopolist must lower as price sells as must lower price to sell more units. In perfect competition, they are price takers, but in a monopoly, they are price makers. So monopolies are price makers. In perfect competition, they are price takers. Next, number two says in Mr. Clifford's example problem for a monopolist, does price ever equal marginal revenue? If so, when? They do. They are the same, yes, but this is only for the first unit of production. Only the first unit of production. Okay. Um, what is price discrimination? Price discrimination is essentially it happens when a firm charges different prices to different consumers of the same product. Okay, so that is when price discrimination happens. Number four says, are there other firms that are price makers besides monopolies? If so, what are they? Well, monopolistic competition, um, and oligopolies. an oligopoly, they are also price makers to a certain limit. All right, they're also price makers to a certain limit. And then number five says in Mr. Clifford's examples, if this monopolist wants to sell more than 3 units, what does he have to do? Well, a monopolist will need to lower their prices, um, but not just for the next unit. He'd have to, he cannot discriminate, so he must lower the prices for all of the previous. Because remember, the demand curve is downward sloping. So if he were to lower the prices, he'd have to lower the prices for everyone. So even if you were buying, let's say, up here to get more people to buy products, he'd have to lower the prices, but then he'd have to charge everyone that lower price. Okay. He can't just pick and choose. Okay. So let's take a look at 61.2. 61.2. 61.2, they give you this monopoly to look at. And based upon this, it says uh, to to determine the following. So it says a monopolist optimal point of output. The optimal point of output. Well, they're going to produce where MC equals MR, which the marginal revenue is off a little bit. It should have the this is different than the one that I have on. I don't know. It's a little bit different here. I think when I blow it up or something. So realistically, this should be over a little bit. So it should be right here, right? And we'll still call this 5, and we'll dot up here and go up here. Okay, because you want to produce where MC equals MR is quantity 5. We always want to produce, and the price will say the price is up here at 40. We'll just slide that down here. So essentially this is what they're going to charge right here, because remember, they're price makers. So they're going to, the MC equals MR sets the quantity, but you're going to go up to the demand curve to set the price. So in a perfectly competitive market, the firm would charge $20, right? The firm would charge $20 on a perfectly competitive market, because essentially the marginal revenue and marginal cost, that would be the price that they would charge. But a monopoly charges $40. So here they would be at quantity 5. They would charge 20. Monopolist is going to charge 40. Okay. A perfectly competitive market, in this example, it would be making zero economic profit. It would be making zero economic profit because the demand would equal the marginal cost curve, which would then equal the average total cost. So remember, the marginal cost curve is essentially the supply curve for the firm, and supply equals demand would be right there. But in a monopoly, they're going to produce where the at the quantity where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, which is at 5, and they're going to charge you this price up here. So we can say right now a monopoly is inefficient, right? So for a in a perfectly for a monopolist profit here, it would be total revenue minus total cost. In this example, that would be $100. They would be making $100. Now it says, is there allocate efficiency in a monopoly? Well, no, no, there's not allocative efficiency in a monopoly. The price is above the marginal cost, so there's no allocated efficiency. Um, and there's no productive efficiency also because the uh, the price is not equal to the minimal. It's not equal to the minimal average total cost curve. And then it says, is there, if there's efficiency for a perfectly competitive, is there efficiency in for this one? Yes, there would be in this example. Yes, there would be allocative efficiency, because essentially in this example, the firm provides every unit for which the consumers are willing to pay at least the marginal cost. And there's also productive efficiency because essentially we've said that the marginal cost here is the average total cost. So essentially, for a perfectly competitive, there is efficiency, whereas a monopolist doesn't have that efficiency. So let's look at 61.3. 61.3 says draw a monopoly graph. Draw a correctly labeled monopoly graph for a firm earning an economic profit. Show the profit maximizing level and shade in the areas of economic profit. So here we go. So I'm going to draw the demand curve here. I'm going to draw the marginal revenue here. Boom, marginal revenue. I'm going to show the, here is marginal cost. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw the, here is average total cost right here. So boom, and then up here, average total cost. Remember, the average total cost intersects at the low point. So essentially, we're going to produce where MC equals MR, right? So this is the quantity right here, right? That's the quantity where MC equals MR. Here is price up here. This is, right? But they're going to charge right here, they're going to charge this price right here. So we'll call that P1. But where does that quantity Q1 intersect the average total cost curve? Right here. So they're going to, the cost of them is P2. So this is the cost. This is the price they're going to charge. So theoretically, P1 minus P2 and multiply that by Q1, that's going to give us our profit. That's going to give us the profit right here. This is the economic profit right here for this firm. Now, in a perfectly competitive market, they would be charging right here. They would be right here at equilibrium, right? So in a perfectly competitive market, we'd actually be producing more at a lower price, but it's a monopoly and they're price makers and they're inefficient. So essentially there is dead weight here. There's dead weight. This triangle right here, this triangle right here is essentially dead weight that is created because monopolies are inefficient. So if we use that graph to answer the next question, it says, why is the marginal revenue below the demand curve in a monopoly? Well, given the downward sloping of the demand curve, a monopolist must lower their prices to all buyers to sell additional units. So as more units are sold beyond the first, the marginal revenue gained is lower than the price. So it's almost like if I sell one product, so if we go down a demand curve, right? We go down a demand curve, right? So if I sell one product for $10, my total revenue would then be $10, right? Then if I sell two products at $9, my total revenue is 18. If I sell three products at let's say $8, my total revenue would be 24. If I sell four products at $7, my total revenue is 28. Well, here's my total revenue. Well, what's happening to my marginal revenue? My marginal revenue is the difference here. So my first one, my marginal revenue would be 10. My next marginal revenue would be 8. Then it would be 6. Then it would be 4. So my marginal revenue would be inside or less than my demand curve. That's how we get where marginal revenue is inside of it. Okay. So that's number two. Number three says, how is the profit maximizing level of output determined in a monopoly? Once again, where MC equals MR. So MC equals MR is at Q1 right here, because this is right here is where MC equals MR. But remember, we are a price maker, so in a monopoly, so we're going to pick this price right here at P1. So four then says, how is the price determined for a monopoly? The price is determined by the demand curve that's above the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So essentially, the price is greater than MC equals MR because marginal revenue is always inside of the demand curve. So the price is always greater than that, and we saw that on that graph. And then number five says, how is the economic for the monopolist determined? Well, if the price is greater than the average total cost, then essentially if the price is above the average total cost at the profit maximizing level, then they're making economic profit. So in this example, we can see here that here's where MC equals MR right here. I dot up to the demand curve right here, and I set this price level right here at P1. But where does at Q1, at quantity Q1, where do I intersect the average total cost curve? Right here. So essentially, per unit, my profit is from here to here per unit, but we're selling Q1 units. So I'd have to take this difference of P1 and P2 and multiply it by Q1, and that would be my profit because my price is P1, but my cost is P2. So my price is greater than my cost. Now, if for some reason my average total cost curve was up here, all right, if my average total cost curve was up here, which I thought it, all right. Then we would dot all the way up to here, and here, this would be my cost. This would be my cost, and then this would be my price right here. So my cost would be greater than it, and then I'd be making a loss. Now, we typically don't see this in a monopoly. Maybe in a monopolistically competitive market, we might see that, but we won't see that in a typical monopoly. Okay, so that was 61.3. 61.3. Let's look at 61.4. So once again, you would have watched this video right here. You would have watched this video, and using this chart, you're going to answer the different points here. So it says point where MC equals MR, point where MC equals MR. Well, the point that MC equals MR is at H, right? MC equals MR is at this point right here. Now, if we remember from this point right here, and we were to dot all the way up here to this demand curve right here, remember the demand curve, and I'm going to just draw it up here. This part of the demand curve over here, this has a different elasticity than this part of the demand curve up here. Oops. The demand curve up here is elastic, and the demand curve down here tends to be more inelastic. Okay. So anyway, um, um, so then number two says the profit maximizing level of output for for a monopoly. The profit maximizing um, output. So they're going to produce at F. So we could say 0F, right? 0F or OF. They're going to produce at point F is the quantity. Then it says the price of profit level, the price of profit level for to make money. They're gonna sell at D. They're gonna sell at D, or you can say OD. All right. Then it says, is this firm earning a profit or loss? Well, if we look, it intersects at quantity F. We go up, this is where MC equals MR, but we could look, where does it intersect the average total cost curve at point I? So I is lower than C. So essentially the cost here is at E. So the price is greater than the cost. So this firm is making a profit. Profit. Now, what is the rectangle of the revenue that they're receiving? The revenue that they're receiving is essentially from O to F to C to D, right? That is the area of it. So it's or we could say OD CF is that rectangle of revenue. What is the rectangle of their profit or loss? We said they're a profit. Well, their profit is this area right here is their profit. So we could say DCIE. Is that right? DCIE would be that rectangle or whatever, however you want to put those letters in there. Um, DCIE or EDCI or however you want to do that, but that is their profit. It says, what is the unit cost at the profit maximizing output? What is the unit cost? Um, it costs, it essentially costs per unit it costs right here per unit to produce is right here at E because that's at point I. So the unit cost is essentially uh, E. That would be the unit cost, right? Yeah, that would be the unit cost. Would be E. Okay, so the unit, or no, what does it say? The rectangle or the unit cost of profit maximizing output. Uh, uh, yeah, the cost would be E at level E, or we could say from F right here to I. We could say E, or we could say F to I. And then it says, what is the rectangle of the total cost? The rectangle of the total cost would be, was that like OEIF, OEIF, okay, or yeah, or OFIE, all right. And then it says the price at profit maximizing level for purely competitive market. Um, the price for purely competitive. Oh, now if this was a purely competitive, if this was a purely competitive, if this was a purely competitive market, they would essentially be producing in a perfectly competitive market. They would be producing here at point B. So it says here price at the profit maximizing level for a purely competitive market. Um, Essentially, they would be producing right here because in a perfectly competitive market, because in a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve is the marginal revenue curve in a perfectly competitive market. So they would essentially be at at B. They would be at B, which at point B, which would be at the price level of E, right? Because E is the price level. Yeah, E is at the price level of B. And then it says a profit maximizing level of a pure competition. Um, level of output, that would be here at A, or OA, as they would say. So we could say OA. So we could say here in a monopoly, we are producing at F and selling it at price level D. But if this was a purely, and this is the type of question that they'll ask on the AP exam, comparing a monopoly to a perfectly competitive. In a perfectly competitive, we would be producing at a price of B here, which is this price level here at E. So essentially, monopolies, monopolies, monopolies usually produce less than a perfectly competitive at a higher price because they're inefficient. They're inefficient. They're inefficient. So therefore, that's why it's going to be they're producing less at a higher price. Okay. So then that leads us to the exit slip. The exit slip. For module 61. So the exit slip says a monopoly is likely to produce blank units of its product and charge a blank price than is perfectly competitive. So this answer would be E. Monopoly is likely to produce fewer units of its product and charge a higher price than the perfectly competitive market. Number two, it says an unregulated monopoly would be D. Will realize an economic profit if the price exceeds the average total cost. And then three says, which of the following is true? This answer would be E. Um, Two is true that a monopolist sets his own output at the price maximizing output of MC equals MR. It would be four here where it says the monopolist price will be greater than marginal revenue when he earns a profit. And then V here, five, which is the monopolist sets his price from his demand curve, not his marginal revenue curve. So that would be E. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful. Until next time, have a great day.